perception of what the majority of founders think is that the founder's time is the most important thing. And I would argue that it's not the founder's time, it's the founder's brain space. And you can have all the time in the world, but if you've got no brain space because you have thinking about 1,000,001 things, then nothing gets done.
So that kind of forced me into this place of looking at building systems and offloading shit that I didn't need to be doing. And then kind of once you're in it, it's like a self-fulfilling art, really, because then you hand it over and you can see that the output's done, and I didn't need to do that this time around, or I didn't need to have that conversation, or I didn't need to check in, or here we are and I've not been involved yet. Yeah, they're pretty cool moments of reflection.
This week we are talking about growing out departments and everything that comes along with that, whether that is deciding which department to grow, whether that is how to grow a department out to actually manage and produce an output or an outcome, and the skills required to be able to do that. Just going back into the memory bank, what was the first department that we grew out?
Do you class like client delivery as a department?
Yep.
Or is it like an absoluteness, just a thing that happens from like day one?
I think client delivery would be one.
Because you're not going to go and build everything else and then have no client delivery.
True, yeah.
Albeit, I did see on Twitter that this guy who has built business after business, exited, built business after business, he made it public that his first hire within any business that he builds is a bookkeeper.
Interesting. Because you'd think that a bookkeeper wouldn't be full-time very quick. Like, it would take a long time to get them to be at a full-time capacity.
It doesn't mean they're not important.
No, it doesn't.
Full-time stuff.
It doesn't.
So yeah, it was quite interesting. That was driven by the length of time he'd lost, or the amount of time he'd lost in his first business exit because the books are all up the foot. And since then, he's hired a bookkeeper as the first hire. He didn't stipulate whether it was full-time. Obviously, it's probably not a full-time role, but yeah, get your numbers right from day one, and there's just one less headache to worry about. A second hire was also an ops delivery role. They kind of came in tandem, didn't they?
Yeah, then it was marketing.
Yeah, it was marketing. That went really well.
Yeah, that went well. That was the worst hire. Then it was marketing again.
Yeah, so what we actually suck at is hiring roles.
Producer Andrea has been an outlier. We found an absolute gem here. But to give everyone a bit of context here, so this is we're talking about Alex and I's first startup, being Amped Outsourcing, and to be honest, this has not been like an easy thing we've learned. It's not been something natural that we have just fallen into. It's actually a massive skill to hire and grow out departments, etc. And through all that, I think we definitely hired the wrong way. In some ways we hired the wrong way because we hired to replace skills that we didn't have rather than hiring to buy back our time, which is kind of our new philosophy from reading the book Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. If you haven't listened to that, it's probably one of the most impactful books I've read. It is the most impactful book that I've read in my last 5 years of business, for sure. And in that, he teaches what they call the replacement ladder. So to give you guys context, what we did to start with, our first hire was an operations manager to manage operations. It was a good hire long term, but it's not the first thing you should hire because we were still doing all the administration. We were still doing the systems building. We were still doing all that kind of stuff, right? Like, it was not... They were managing something that didn't really exist in that moment. Would you agree there, Alex?
Yeah, the label was definitely like way beyond what the day-to-day looked like.
Yeah.
It's quite a fancy label for a bit of reconciliation work and
maybe a bit of audit. So our philosophy now has kind of changed a lot, right? So in any business that we be a part of or want to start up, the first level to kind of get rid of is administration. And my hot take on this is every founder should have an assistant. There's actually a story that's out there of I actually watched it the other day. It was a private equity manager, and he purchased a business, and the CEO stayed on, and the CEO didn't have an assistant. And the board said, hey, you need an assistant, and the CEO refused to have an assistant, and the board fired him. And the logic behind it was that every email you send, every flight that you book, every call meeting that you book in your own calendar, everything that you do that someone else can do for you is costing the business thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in relation to what his annual salary and full bonus package was. And my kind of saying is, if you don't have an assistant, you are the assistant, and that's not where most founders should be spending their time. Most founders should be spending their time on the things that they struggle at, being usually the sales and marketing side and potentially product, but they end up dealing with administration and reconciling accounts and setting things up that they don't necessarily need to do, and thus become admin, right? So that's what I would say rung one of that ladder is. Now, for each business, that's going to look slightly different, and what that assistant supports you in is going to be different. My belief is that all assistants should fully own your calendar and your inbox to be able to filter through what's going on in your life and have context for it, to be able to provide you support, not just for your business, but your life as well. And then start scaling out their capabilities with you. So managing your CRM, or just those kind of like little finicky tasks that you end up doing because you know how to do it, but you don't actually need to do it if you just taught someone how to do it. And it's also a really good training ground to teach yourself how to teach others to get an output. I suppose for you, Alex, when we took on that first one of our bigger done for you clients, you had no option but to find someone at that kind of finance admin level and then train them up to they now merely manage the whole function themselves, right? Like if you go through that pain, there is a reward on the other side. Sometimes it seems like it's not, and it's never there, but you'd agree that it is there if you spend the time there, right?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head that you do have to experience the pain in order to have the stimulus to drive some sort of change. And my philosophy was pretty simple with it, in that we're here to build a business, not to build another job to kind of sit into. And that would mean that this needs to run with or without us on a daily basis. And without having that resource on hand, then that function would come to a standstill if I wasn't there. And ultimately, it just detracted from trying to move our business forward, as well as keep that client deliverables firing out. But I think what was crucial to the success of said person, who has now worked her way up from like a junior accountant to managing a team to ultimately kind of delivering a lot of the function itself, is that I had to be in there. I had to understand what needed to happen. I had to know how to, transition processes and tasks across. I had to write the playbooks for it, change the playbooks, test the playbooks. There's still an element of knowing the underlying thing that needs to happen in order to bring somebody on successfully. And like, you've experienced that in your own life with your own EA, having been the person that writes the playbook for them to pick up. She isn't just doing stuff that you've got no familiarity of. Like, no, everything is well versed, well rehearsed. It's intentional, and I think within that systemization is where the freedom lies. But it can be something that's quite difficult from a mindset perspective to overcome. I've heard it in the past that the thought of having somebody, manage their calendar, screen their inbox, triage their inbox, they can perceive it as quite a restrictive philosophy externally. Whereas you found it to be the opposite thing, in that it's quite a free and enabling tool to have in place. Yeah, well, most founders and business leaders treat their inbox like a public to-do list, Like, hey, I need this person, just email them, and then, you've got to go in there, check your own calendar, check if it works, like you've got no filter for your own time. So when you give someone rules to follow, it makes it very clear on what's in and what's out, and where it fits and where it doesn't fit. Where I feel like as founders, we don't have rules for our own time, and that causes a lot of issues. But yeah, it is a trust thing, and it can be super frustrating as well. Like, it's not usually a super smooth transition, but getting that admin stuff off your plate quickly means you can focus on those higher level tasks more efficiently and sooner. Because the sooner you can do that, those tasks, those high level tasks, just pushing them to the side doesn't fix anything. It just means you're delaying having to focus. You're delaying being able to focus on them and solve some of those high level problems, because you've got to answer an email or first level customer service questions, or there's an error in a CRM database or something like that. And obviously, like with our journey, you you brought on an EA 4.5 years into the journey, not like day one.
No.
So retrofitting a lot of things, and for 4 years you've carried the weight of doing everything and anything. For those that are listening and they have just set up a business or they think of setting up a business, and how we reinforce that like everybody should have an executive assistant and it needs to be done sooner rather than later. Do you think you could talk to a specific point in time when you do onboard that person, or do you feel it's a culmination of having some sort of steady cash flow first and hustling away and wearing all the hats for 6 months? Like what? Yeah, how do you speak to the timing of it?
The day you have revenue, you should have an EA. So Dan, my mentor, he said to me on a call once, he said, if I had to sell the business and all the staff went with it, I would negotiate keeping my EA. Like that's the level that he has, where he puts his EA on the importance list. Like he would negotiate keeping his EA to support him, because it's not just, we try to separate business and life, and we've talked about this before, where you have this work-life balance and your business life and personal life, and when you're a founder, that's not the case. There's no way to separate it. So having someone actually be able to provide you that 360 life support with business, with personal life, with having, trying to get date nights into your calendar so you can have a healthy relationship and, spend time with your kids and all that kind of stuff, actually is... the return on investment for that is 10 times more than wearing the hats for the first 6 months. So my message always is the day you've got revenue is the day you should hire, because then you can you don't actually have to learn those tasks initially. You can just fire them off and to someone with some experience in the role, and then you can go and focus on the higher level tasks and the stuff that's actually going to move the needle forward. Now, I failed at this, right? Like I hired an assistant 4 years ago and didn't have the skills or the playbooks to actually manage her, and she was really, really good, and she kind of transitioned to be like a company secretary and now is our procurement manager for the company. So that was really good, because she's an incredibly skilled and diligent worker. But it's very easy to kind of not put the time, like think that hiring an EA is just going to be like a quick fix, and that it's going to solve everything and spend no time with them, and it all of a sudden, people are just going to get stuff done. That's not necessarily the case. Like, it's an investment. You're investing in someone to learn the business, to support you and how you want your life run and all that kind of stuff. So it does take work as much as it can sound easy sometimes.
Yeah, anything worth having and having done well is going to take time. It's not going to be a click of the fingers. Somebody slides in, knows what undies you're wearing, knows how you like your coffee on day one. Like it is going to take time. In terms of coming back to, building out departments and businesses, so say we are speaking to listeners that have been running something for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years even, and still find themselves in kind of that solopreneurial space, but have the potential, the world's greatest killer, to build a business systematically. From a which department do I build first perspective, how would you tactically go about that? Because if it was me rebuilding what we've built, I don't know if I would have the foresight to kind of look forward and build for like future stuff, or I'd just try to build to ease pain from current stuff.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think, again, my philosophy on this is hire to buy back your time. So don't hire to replace yourself or for a skill set that you don't have. Like, hire to buy back your time, and what is taking the most time off you right now, and hire that person. That's the philosophy, and it's completely different to hiring an operations manager because they're going to manage operations. It's hiring operations because I'm spending half my day dealing with XYZ, or hiring marketing because I'm not good at marketing. I think lots of founders do hire based on a lack of skills, but when it comes to like marketing and sales and Dan's formula, those are the last rungs you deal with. Those are the things you should be learning yourself, because those skills are going to be the things that carry you forward no matter what you do, whether that's this business, the next business, whatever. Like, those skills are irreplaceable, and no one's going to be able to sell and market like the founder themselves. So that's but what did we do? We tried to hire them as hire number 3 and wondered why the blog post came out sounding like some AI robot before ChatGPT was even a thing.
Yeah.
So it's important to understand hiring someone is not just going to solve a problem if there's if you've done it incorrectly, if they don't have the right skills, like there's so many things that play into that department hiring and that kind of strategy, I suppose. But you can't even think about that if you're still dealing with admin, which is why you've got to get rid of that first and then have that free brain space to strategize and to think. Now, a lot of people think that the most perception of what the majority of founders think is that the founder's time is the most important thing. And I would argue that it's not the founder's time, it's the founder's brain space. And you can have all the time in the world. You could have a completely free day, but if you've got no brain space because you have, thinking about 1,000,001 things, then nothing gets done. And those kind of high energy thought patterns like strategy, hiring decisions, and things like that, those can only really be great decision-making processes if you've got the brain space to really think through them, to really kind of strategize. So you've got to get rid of that early stage, sending invoices, all that shit off your plate as soon as possible, and then kind of focus up, I suppose. So, but yeah, to answer your question, it's hire to buy back your time. Don't hire to replace skill sets.
Is it as simple as like, I've been doing this admin stuff all day? Is it as simple as that? Or is there a more methodical approach to this is where my hours go, even if I feel like they're not going there, and therefore this is what I should be dealing with, like to get rid of?
Yeah, there's multiple ways to do it. I mean, I've seen people set timers, and every hour a timer goes off and they write down what they've done for the last hour.
Sounds like an accountant firm.
It's on the 6 minute or lawyer firm. And buy back your time, there's a thing called the time energy audit. So you audit your time by every 15-minute blocks. But not only the time you're spending, whether that task gives you energy, is neutral, or takes away energy, so you can kind of understand, am I spending a lot of time on things that take away my energy, because those are the things you want to get rid of first. So yeah, there's that way. There's a lot of methods, but I think at the end of the day, it's just becoming conscious of it.
Yeah.
And however you do that is completely up to you. But I mean, you've experienced this as well. I mean, I vividly remember when you were looking after some of our larger clients and responsible for outputs, me kind of reminding you, or because we both know how kind of fixated we can both get on a certain task or getting an output or whatever, but also reminding you that you've got a team that you can teach to be able to help you get that output, and so that it doesn't drain your time and energy, so that you can kind of continue growing the business, right?
Yeah, I have struggled with the transfer of ownership in the past. And it's not because I've not known what to do. I'm obviously super close to what that looks like. I think I just found myself falling into that kind of founder cesspit of it's easier, quicker, gets done now if I do it myself, and then spend the next 3 years still doing it myself.
Yeah.
So that's something that definitely has come up with me in the past. Now I've definitely improved on this. Like I've become, as you alluded to, consciously aware to it. But that's only through observing and being present to a better way to do things, or a more efficient way to do things. So yeah, historically I've found myself kind of fall into that trap of it's easier if I just get it done, and I think that's where a lot of people operate from.
Oh, totally. That's just easy if I do it myself. Oh, if I want it done right, I've got to do it myself. It's all those kinds of thought patterns. So what's your kind of playbook in like getting yourself out of that, like bringing awareness to it? What did you do to isolate that? Because I struggle with it as well, in the sense of like managing an output rather than managing a task. Like, hey, this is the output I want. I don't care what tasks you do to get there, but this is the output I need. So that's been a big focus for me. What was it for you?
This is really simple. Just keep having kids.
What, just literally cut your time available in half and see what happens?
Yeah, if you take away 80% of your productive time, you become way more efficient.
It's not a bad thought.
I mean, don't worry about the consequences. Just let go of that self-discipline. Have another kid, had another one, and maybe another one. And then you'll find yourself like you're just forced to be more efficient. Forced to get out of your own way. I think jokes aside, how did I get I think environment's a big one. So obviously immersing myself in like what you was doing or are doing through Dan's stuff, and your ways of being, and things just us realigning on where we wanted the business to be, and how, well, if I'm stuck doing this, then there's no chance, or not that there's no chance, but it's going to be a more way more difficult journey to get there if there's just one of us that's focused on it rather than both of us that's focused on it. So that kind of forced me into this place of looking at building systems and offloading that I didn't need to be doing. And then kind of once you're in it, it's like a self-fulfilling art, really. Because then you hand it over and you can see that the output's done and, oh, I didn't need to do that this time around, or I didn't need to have that conversation, or I didn't need to check in, or shit, month end's kind of done and here we are and I've not been involved yet. So, yeah, they're pretty cool moments of reflection when everything starts to pull together.
Yeah, it is that. And it is those moments where you're like, oh, I can actually do this. Like, if I can do it for finance, I can do it for admin. If I can do it for admin, I can do it for sales. Sales is a tough one. That's a whole playbook in itself that we haven't cracked yet. But I know we've had our first client expansion that we had nothing to do with.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Oh, and historically we've had calls booked, we've had opportunities teed up, we've obviously done a lot of the closing ourselves. But again, it's probably more just a reflection of, in Matt's philosophy, how that's the last thing that you get yourself out of. We're probably not ready to get ourselves out of it yet. No. We haven't mastered it. We haven't, fine-tuned it. We're definitely not in a position to write a really effective playbook on
sales,
B2B offshore and sales. So, how could we?
I think another thing that you could probably talk to as well is like the nervousness that founders feel around the increased cost of building out teams and departments. And I think another massive limiting belief that founders have is, it's cheaper if I do it as well. It's cheaper if I just plug away at this task for the next 4 hours. From a cash outflow point of view, sure, maybe cheaper, but maybe you could talk to the impact of that mindset as you start to scale and like some effective strategies around minimizing that.
Yeah, of course. Like, it's always going to be cheaper, or like your cash burn's going to be less if you're doing it and somebody else is doing it. But I think, the double-edged sword to that is obviously the opportunity cost that comes with it, both from a growth perspective, but actually like the dollar cost of the opportunity that you're giving up by having to do everything. You take 500k profit a year and you split that over whatever hours you work, and I can guarantee that as the business owner / founder, it's costing you a bit more than the $40 an hour you take home to get that done. So yeah, and again, I think that's more a reflection of whether or not you're consciously aware of opportunity cost, or it just doesn't even cross your mind. Like, I can guarantee that there are founders that don't think that way. And is that because I don't know why that would be. Yeah, I suppose it's just one of those, like, you don't know if you don't know.
Yeah, and it could be a lack of understanding in like finance, and actually, like you said, understanding opportunity costs is something that I never understood, thinking, okay, well, business pays me, I don't know, say $100,000 a year, but there's also a dividend payout of $150,000. My take home is $250,000. My actual hourly wage on that is, what is that roughly?
For this example, it's $320 an hour.
Okay, $320 an hour. You spend half an hour trying to type a perfect email out to someone who's, I don't know, got a complaint, that's an expensive email, or you book your own flights, it's an expensive email. So although the cash outflow may look better, the opportunity cost is the difference between what you'd pay someone to do that email for you or send that email, book those flights, and what you earn. So that delta can be massive, which is kind of what I was saying in that earlier example about the CEO that refused to get an assistant. At a company point of view, it should kind of be a requirement. And for high-performing CEOs, I would say it's the most untalked about powerhouse behind them is a decent assistant. The other thing I wanted you to talk about is maybe some strategies that can be used in order to grow out departments. Hint, offshoring, but also part-time specialized work, or having like an agency do something for you, or what are those kind of other ways to get that department output but maybe not have to hire headcount yourself?
Yeah, I think the first port of call though is that no matter kind of which way or how you build out the department to achieve the outcome that you want to achieve is, you got to be crystal clear on what the output actually is. Got to be crystal clear on what needs to happen. You got to be crystal clear on, I was going to say who does what, but depending on the model that you go with, there are models that you have no input on and you just get given bump. And then if you build in-house, then you have total control over everything that happens. So yeah, I'd say the big thing is knowing what the output is. I think that's number one. And then that's where the choice comes in around how you get to said output, whether it be build an in-house onshore team, where you are pulling all of the levers to pull that team together, build a process, build
management structures,
structures, build, quality control and
reporting lines,
all that sort of stuff. And if you decide that you do want ultimate control, then I think there's a decision point around, do we hire somebody here? Do we look at hiring somebody overseas? What would be the drivers of doing either of those? Some people love like the intimacy and like the get together, thrive together of being in proximity to one another. Others are more, I guess, cash conservative and believe that they can build solid enough processes and playbooks to have somebody do it further afield, which is great, really effective. And obviously that's kind of what we push. And then obviously another model is to outsource the whole kind of function and just get the output out the other side, which is something that we've helped to facilitate as well. And that would be, example could be somebody who just crunches invoices all day and you look in the inbox and the backlog's gone and that's all you really care about. Or you're running a call center and all you care about is your CSAT scores. You don't care how it's done, how it's handled, what tech stack's used, what management structure's in place. You just want the outcome. So yeah, they're probably the three different strategies of building out a department.
And there's pluses and minuses either way. Like, we've worked with agencies for marketing output before, for example, and you sometimes can feel like they're not all that invested. They're not sitting there like really diving into the business and all that kind of stuff. They're there to just kind of do X thing, and anytime it strays from X thing, you get another invoice. So they can kind of be like a weird relationship. But for sometimes it's like the best thing you need. You just need clips. You just need social media management. You just need a bit of community. You've got a very set task, and that's really cool. And again, in every agency, there's good players and bad players, and there's people that have got awesome service offerings and very, very subpar service offerings. So it's just important to kind of not do what we do, which is get sold by the person, but actually dive into the process and what it looks like in that space. And then, but the positive to that is you're not managing anyone. You're just asking for an output and hoping that they can kind of produce that to the level that you describe. Where hiring is completely different, because you will have a feeling like you say, that control, and you'll have the feeling of like partnering with a single person, and you'll know who's doing the work and who's responsible for what. But it requires management structure, it requires one-on-ones, it requires alignment, and it requires all that kind of stuff, which we're experiencing at the moment, building out our media agency, and it requires all sorts of stuff, but you've got control. So there's positive and minuses either way, and I suppose it depends on you as a founder as to like what you believe the best kind of model to work with is going to be. But not deciding is also probably the worst thing to do as well. Like if the department needs to be built, you need to decide which way you're going to build it, and quickly.
Why did we opt to build the media team in-house and not use an agency?
Yeah, I think the in-house media team was a couple of things. We have some pretty complex media requirements in that there's multiple brands to manage and everything that goes along with that, right? Like, multiple marketing messages, tactics, they're in completely different industries. Like there's so much in that space. So we felt like having someone who could head that up and grow out the systems and the process and all that kind of stuff would be an advantage long term. And eventually, once we get our own stuff managed, be able to sell that as a productized service to other businesses, which we could slightly plug potentially. We could put a bit of a plug in here, maybe a bit later on. So yeah, so we felt like the control, and we had the time to build those management structures to produce the output that we needed, and we'd have that intimate one-on-one relationship with it. And for Alex, for us, I suppose, we enjoy a bit of banter. I don't know if you could tell from the podcast. So you can't really banter with an agency. It's very hard to build a culture with an agency. It's, building an in-house team we felt was a better solution for us. And that's the road we went down. And I don't think we'd do it differently now, looking back.
It resonated with me because we've used agencies in the past and it's just never really fired well. We've actually got quite a few disappointing agency experiences. But I think kind of relaying back to when you was talking about Dan's replacement ladder, how sales and marketing's the last one. I feel like us appointing a media team in-house to build our brands and build a podcast and, help with all of these ad hoc things we throw at them, in turn helps me learn and understand more about the process and the output and how we get there and what works and what doesn't work, so that I am better positioned for like future stuff that does happen. And like slowly climbing the ladder to somewhat mastery, you know, where one day we can be out of that process. So I think getting exposure to it definitely helps with that philosophy. Whereas just being like, yo, we need this by Friday, get it to us, and then somebody produces something, then there's revisions and I just feel like that wouldn't fit the journey that we're on at the moment.
True.
In the last 12 months, our offshoring, outsourcing, we grew really, really well, and then we've had a bit of trouble in paradise. And off the back of that, we actually built a new department within the business. And it wasn't like a instant impact. We had some noisy clients that weren't happy with a few things, and understandably so. But even then, her introduction took like 30, 45 days just to kind of start making an impact. But what was the trigger for us?
Yeah, because I struggled to understand this department. When it's been pitched to me for about a year, or to us for about a year. I really struggled to understand the impact that it would make, because I thought that someone else should have already been doing this, and that's where I was a little bit out of touch. I suppose we were both a bit out of touch with the operational requirement of the business and what that means, and the client success side and the HR side. So when you were talking to me before about getting really clear on like roles and responsibilities and outputs, I think that's something that we should have done a lot earlier, because I couldn't distinguish between where one department started and where another department finished. You know, it was very hard. So I gave up fighting our operations manager for this this hire, and I said, "Sweet, go and do it." You know, and in some ways, I see that as a massive win that our ops manager fought for so long and so hard for this role, you know, and actually drove the business case for it. So that was also actually a slight win, because potentially some other people in that seat might not have. They might have just kind of been like, oh, they don't want me to hire that, and kind of crumbled. But he persisted and persisted for years, a couple of years around it. So, and it was a great choice. It was one of the best business cases he's made, and it's made a meaningful impact to our clients feeling supported, and also being that bridge between what the company is delivering and what the client is requiring, and the staff member delivering that. So that's been a huge win. But again, it wasn't a fast. There's definitely been an ROI. I'd say she's definitely worked to save a few clients and opened up a few doors to different opportunities. But it was not a fast process. It was a new department. It was painfully slow to offload everyone's information from different locations, write the new playbooks, and then go and inject them into that and iterate as quickly as we did.
Yeah, and I think a big, like, one of the more tangible impacts from it is having like this space that our team can feel like they're heard, they're understood, they have somebody that fights in their corner as much as she also represents the client. And I think what we have seen from it, and this is me literally going off feel, just like how I play golf, so it could be a horrendous feel right now, is that like we have seen a noticeable reduction in resignations, in staff turnover, client turnover as well. Like we went through a patch there where it was pretty rough. There's been a couple of expansion opportunities identified. Like she's really helped to come in and bolster that, and it's probably more so time now to kind of reflect on what that journey's been like over the last 4 or 5 months. And then see how we can now take client success to like the next level. It'd be pretty cool to strategize on that. And I mean, and even that being said, like we've still got learnings all the time off the back of this week's L10 meeting, our leadership meeting. You know, there were some comments in there around, you know, things that we may have thought worked really well and it hasn't, and they're not having this opportunity to tweak our approach and maybe do things differently next time. Like there's obviously always chances to improve process. But yeah, definitely expanding into that kind of space was really, really beneficial for the business.
For sure. And like at a super high level, you know, most founders and business leaders listening to this will be plugged into some type of mentor or I hope some type of, you know, business learning or audiobooks or something like that. So at the end of the day, when you come to growing out departments especially, yes, you can take on all this information and listen to all the theories on what you should hire first and all this kind of stuff. Like I firmly believe myself, administration goes first. You get an assistant who can provide you that life support and that business support. After that, you're the founder, you're the business leader. You can build a business case that shows an ROI that, has all these reasons why we need to hire this person and all these cons against hiring another person or growing out a department or whatever. But I think our gut knows, you gut feel, the right decision to make. This department's going to provide you more time to focus on other things. Like, yes, business can be very transactional and you can look at it from a pure ROI point of view. But at the start, I think a lot of it is just understanding your business, your customers, how you feel, your own life, and making those somewhat gut feel decisions. Is kind of what I would say there. Like, at the time, like for the recent department we've grown out, yeah, there was a business case for it. I still didn't understand it myself, but gut feeling, I knew that something had to be done in the space, so we just accepted it and we just did it, and it turned out to be the best decision. But on paper, at the time, there were arguments both ways. There was arguments that someone else in operations could support that, or there were other business cases that could have been actioned on. So I suppose just at that high level for most people, just to trust what your gut's telling you, and take on all the information, but trust your gut. Right, how are you finding these podcasts, by the way, Alex? Just a bit of a feels test here. Are you enjoying them?
Oh, I think I'm enjoying the experience as a whole in terms of like creating and launching a podcast. There have been some topics that I've found quite easy to speak to, some topics that felt a bit more like, it's took brain space to talk about. I've enjoyed like the interview stuff. That's been pretty cool, and I'd like for us to do more of them. Like, we've got a massive guest list to get some really interesting conversations flowing. But yeah, on the whole, it's been really enjoyable, actually.
I found it interesting in just that it does put a pause on life and make you kind of reflect on your week and your learnings and all that kind of stuff, which is just something that I don't think we've done very well, is reflect on the journey and try and compartmentalize decisions we've made and cause and effects to it and all that kind of stuff. So I've enjoyed it from that point of view. But let us know, wherever you're listening to this, what you've enjoyed most, what topics you might want to hear more of. Alex alluded to, we've got a guest list that we're pretty excited to bring on, some people who have got some crazy stories and some crazy playbooks. I know one guest I'm really excited to talk to and dive into is Oren, good friend of ours, Oren. He managed to raise a $10 million series through the midst of COVID in the middle of the UAE. So that was, he's got an incredible playbook around, raising capital. I think he'll be on in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. But yeah, if you've got any other topics, let us know below. Go back and listen to our other episodes. There's some awesome people that we've interviewed there, and some other playbooks and some other podcasts on, other topics. But appreciate your time. Appreciate everyone listening. And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Peace.